Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. That's audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Geoffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health, and really without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. That's betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
You're listening to the sweet and sensual sounds of nerdery and murdery.
Seriously, you're an idiot. Welcome to episode 101 of Nerdery and Murdery.
101, baby.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yep.
Amazing. We're in the 100s now.
That's right.
So welcome to the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, the good and the bad, the nerd and the murd. Zig, I will let you take over on the nerdery side of the house.
Well, hello, people. I am Zig with your nerdery. Today we are talking about the Sixth Doctor.
Awesome.
Doctor Who. The Sixth Doctor is an incarnation of Doctor Who, the protagonist of the BBC science fiction television series Doctor Who. He was portrayed by Colin Baker, and although his television time on the series was comparatively brief and turbulent, Baker has continued as the Sixth Doctor in Big Finish's range of original Doctor Who audio adventures within the series narrative.
I've heard that Big Finish is really good.
Some of that Big Finish stuff is really, really great. It's all audio plays. Mm-hmm. Apparently, the British still do audio dramas where we really don't anymore. Well, I mean, we do now. Like they went away for like 30, 40 years here, and they've come back in the last few via podcasts, like what we do. But yeah, we didn't have audio dramas for a long time. Sorry, I lost where I was. The Doctor is a centuries-old alien Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey. who travels in time and space in a TARDIS, frequently with companions. At the end of the life, the Doctor regenerates, and as a result, the physical appearance and personality of the Doctor changes. This particular incarnation was seen as arrogant, flamboyant, in brightly colored, mismatched clothes, whose brash and often patronizing personality set him apart from his previous incarnations. Colin Baker was an English actor who played Paul Maroney in the BBC drama, the series The Brothers, from 1974 to 1976. And the sixth incarnation of the Doctor in the long-running science fiction television series Doctor Who from 1984 to 1986. Baker's tenure as the Doctor proved to be a controversial era for the series, which included a hiatus in production and his subsequent replacement on the orders of the BBC executive Michael Grade. Colin Baker was born in Waterloo, London, England. He moved north to Rockdale with his family when he was 3 years old, and he was educated at St. Bede's College, Manchester, where he passed A-levels in French, Latin, and Greek. Particularly strong in Latin and Greek, Baker achieved 2 A grades. He studied law at the London College and subsequently trained to become a solicitor. But at the age of 23, Baker enrolled in the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, or LAMDA. Baker's numerous television roles in the early 1970s included supporting roles in the 1970 BBC adaptation of Jean-Paul Sartre's trilogy, The Roads to Freedom, a leading role as Count Steinbeck in their adaptation of Cousin Bet, the following year playing opposite Margaret Tyzack and Helen Mirren. In 1972, he played Anatole Kurgan opposite Anthony Hopkins in the BBC adaptations of War and Peace. His regular television work continued with The Fall of Eagles. Baker appeared as Crown Prince Wilhelm of the German Empire. But the far more prominent role to date came in 1974, playing a ruthless banker, Paul Maroney, in the BBC Sunday evening series The Brothers. So, much like his predecessor, Colin Baker was very well known, which wasn't the case for the Doctors before. They were character actors and things like this. He was actually a kind of a star. After The Brothers, Colin worked regularly in theater, and his television work became less frequent, although he guest starred as Babin the Butcher in a 1980 episode of Blake 7, which was incredible. City at the Edge of the World. He further guest roles on television in the 1983 feature in a BBC production of A.J. Cronin's The Citadel. Baker made his first appearance in Doctor Who as Commander Maxwell in the Peter Davison era story Arc of Infinity. So he actually shows up as a Gallifreyan about a year before he starts the role as Doctor Who. He became the second of the 3 actors to be cast as the Doctor by producer John Nathan Turner. Baker's first appearance in the starring role occurred in the final moments of the Caves of the Androzani, where he delivers his first few lines. He then made his full story debut the following week in The Twin Dilemma. The serial and Baker's portrayal of the Doctor caused immediate controversy, with one scene in which the Doctor attempts to strangle his companion, Perry Brown.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. According to Pop Matters, Colin Baker's first appearance was just out and out dislikable, showcasing a hubris and harshness that was heretofore unseen in the Doctor's emotional canon. Yeah. That is not inaccurate. I did not care for him the first time I saw him. I'm gonna be honest. But in keeping with the tradition of this show, that's probably the right move to make. I'm gonna be honest. You don't go from friendly, likable Peter Davison into another friendly, likable person, right? You go from, okay, let's say you go from James Bond, which is David Tennant, to the friendly, childlike, likable Matt Smith. and then you go into Peter Capaldi,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the way you do that, right? You want to cast against type, which is exactly what they did, which is why those three actors worked so well. And then you round it out. You go back to kind of a childlike idea after Capaldi with Jodie Whittaker. Amazing, amazing that lead up, and Colin Baker, who was quite an acclaimed actor himself, did exactly that. What he actually wanted to play was Chris Eccleston type, which is why he loved when they brought it back and Chris Eccleston was Chris Eccleston. He actually wanted to wear a black leather trench coat and a dark colored sweater underneath. That was actually his original idea for the wardrobe of the Doctor. And John Nathan Turner said no. And if you watch Chris Eccleston, that's exactly what they put him in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if they would have trusted Colin Baker a little more at the beginning, at the onset, his tenure would have been considered groundbreaking. But at the same time, Michael Grade, who went on record as saying he thinks Doctor Who's time had passed before he took over the job, right? So he's looking to get rid of Doctor Who anyway. So, you know, I don't think Colin Baker really ever got the chance. His writing was a little better. Toward the end of his tenure, they were putting way more money into special effects. They were much better. Sets looked a lot better. I mean, it was still the 1980s, so it was all practical effects. But no, I think Colin Baker did a fine job. I actually like him better than Peter Davison. Not because I dislike Peter Davison, but Peter Davidson's writing was not as good as Colin Baker's was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, he was a contentious person. Baker's era was interrupted by an 18-month hiatus, which was announced in February of 1985, midway through transmission of season 22. His first full season. The controller of BBC One at the time, Michael Grade, criticized Doctor Who, saying the program had become overtly violent. And Grade later admitted that he hated the series, which he described as very clunky studio show. One new Doctor Who story, Slipback, was produced for a radio during that hiatus, which starred Baker and his regular television companion, Nicola Bryant. Nicola Bryant, or Perry Brown, Perpigillion Brown, was the first American companion. Nicola Bryant's not actually American. She just does a really good American accent. Actually, she doesn't sound American. She sounds Canadian, but it's pretty good. It's a pretty good accent. But she is actually quite English. But she was doing a play where she was playing an American, and they liked her so much they cast her as Perry Brown. I don't think she got to finish up the storyline of Perry the way she wanted to, or as a fan, I would have wanted her to. But it was kind of dark. It took a dark turn. Doctor Who did return to television for its 23rd season in September of 1986. This season featured a reduction in episodes and was made entirely on video for location scenes, and was produced as a 14-episode long series called The Trial of a Time Lord. That series was a meta-textual reference to the fact the series itself was on trial at the time. And in 1986, Baker told an interviewer, Tom Baker did it for 7 years. That's part of me, which likes to have a tilt at the record. So what he wanted to do was actually do Doctor Who for longer than Tom Baker. He wanted to do it for 8 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't give him a chance to. However, later that year, Grade agreed to commission another series on the condition that Tom Baker or Colin Baker was replaced. Colin Baker in later years has said that he kind of feels bad about not going in and doing the regeneration scene. Basically, they took the next Doctor, Sylvester McCoy and put him in a wig in Colin Baker's costume and did the regeneration that way. Basically, they filmed it with the wig on and then took the wig off and superimposed those two things. Which made a really clunky, jerky transition. Colin Baker did say that he had he have been able to do it over again, he would have gone on and done the regeneration scene. But he was so pissed off at the time because, again, they fought him from the time he got the role on his costuming, which he hated. I get that's an ugly ass jacket. The way he portrayed it, because he wanted to portray him as being a little more sympathetic, but also a little crazy because he's an alien. And to a regular human being, some of the things he does, we should perceive them as being crazy. I think that's a brilliant idea. That's the way the first guy did it. But they kind of fought him over this and this. And instead of him looking kind of crazy and alienish, the way they kind of cut it together, they just made him look mean. And that was not what he was, as an actor, that's not what he was going for. But that's what he was forced into. He only starred in 11 stories, just short of 3 years in the series, including the hiatus, making his tenure as the Doctor Who the shortest at that point. After his sacking, Baker was offered a single 4-part story that would end in his character's death and subsequent regeneration, but he refused the offer. Baker offered to do the entirety of the following season and regenerate at its conclusion, but the BBC now responded to his letter. Instead, his replacement, Sylvester McCoy, did the regeneration scene, as we said before. On the 4th of September 2011 at Riverside Studios, Hammersmith, London, Baker accepted the presidency of the Doctor Who Appreciation Society, which had previously been held by John Pertwee and Nicholas Courtney. He was elected following an online poll of the society's members, where he won more votes than any of the other candidates combined. And again, they also did some weird things with the way the series was held out. His first full episode, as we've said before, was at the end of the 21st season. So the penultimate episode, Peter Davison regenerates into Colin Baker, or the 5th Doctor regenerates into the 6th Doctor. And then the next full episode of that season is the Twin Dilemma, with him basically trying not to be crazy, which is basically what that episode's about. And he ends up stumbling across something that's so horrifying that he has to basically take up being the Doctor. So the previous actor, Peter Davison, had left after only 3 years. And due to his decidedly short screen time, the 6th Doctor appeared with only 2 companions, most notably the American college student, Perry Brown, played by Nicola Bryant, who had traveled with him through the caves of the Androzani. And then he was briefly joined by Bonnie Langford, Melanie Bush. Bonnie Langford is the actress, Melanie Bush is the character.
Mm-hmm.
A computer technician from his future who he had yet to actually meet during the trial, which is weird. They kind of brought her in. It's like, okay, we brought another companion from further down your timeline. And she came in and she knew who he was, but he didn't know who she was, which they end up playing on with River Song much later in the series. The first time they did it was with Mel, but it was just kind of a few throwaway lines. Now, prior to its postponement, season 23 was well advanced with episodes already drafted and at least one case distributed to cast and production alongside The Nightmare Fair, The Ultimate Evil, Mission to Magnus, Yellow Fever, and How to Cure It. And the remaining stories were still under development in the 25-minute episode format. After the season was postponed, these were all dropped with the reconception of the season in mid-1985 in favor of the 14-episode story arc, The Trial of a Time Lord. Now, The Trial of a Time Lord actually it's one big, long story, but it's broken up into 3 different story parts. You see what happens to Perry. You see him the first time he meets Mel, and then they run around the Matrix in the last part. trying to get the Valyard. There's also a really good one too called Terror of the Vervoids, which kind of happens in that time. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's 4 little storylets. Because Terror of the Vervoids happens before the Ultimate Foe. It's the Mysterious Planet, Mind Warp, Terror of the Vervoids, and the Ultimate Foe. Terror of the Vervoids is probably one of the best produced episodes of Doctor Who I have ever seen. Full stop. It is as good as the modern series, production-wise. They've got these evil plant creatures, which are basically trying to take over the spaceship that's traveling through hyperspace. I believe it's called the Hyperion, and it's a cruise ship with cargo in the bottom, and that's where these plants come from. It's incredible. If you've never seen an episode of Colin Baker and the idea of him going crazy and trying to kill his companion is off-putting, and it is off-putting. It was off-putting the first time I saw it. It was off-putting the second time I saw it. Probably the 10th time I saw it was off-putting. Not so much now because I know what happens. I would say go with Terror of the Vervoid. It is probably the best part of his tenure. Probably the best episode, even though it's toward the end. And it's really, really well done, really good, well made. They spent some money on it. Of course, they'd also cut their budget, or they cut the season down in half, but they kept their budget. So they were able to spend more money on those 14 episodes as opposed to a full 28 episodes. So the tone is better. And going forward, the next few seasons were only like 14 episode seasons. So they also were able to use that budget more surreptitiously. And they look a lot better. How the Trial of the Time Lord went down, it was the 23rd season of the British science fiction television series Doctor Who, and it is known collectively as the Trial of the Time Lord. And again, as I said, it was The Mysterious Planet, Mind Warp, Terror of the Vervoids, and the Ultimate Foe. The season also marked the final regular appearance of Colin Baker as the 6th Doctor. The idea of the series stemmed from several production changes to Doctor Who, such as reduced screen time for the season at the instructions of the BBC One controller Michael Grade. He also said it needed to contain less violence and more humor. Several problems occurred during production, including the death of scriptwriter Robert Holmes, who had been with Doctor Who for a long time, and a resignation of script editor Eric Soward. When it ended, Baker was dismissed from the role by orders of Grade. John Nathan Turner, producer of the series, said that he in the serial, the 6th Doctor is tried by the High Council of the Time Lords for breaking several of laws of Gallifrey, the Time Lords' homeworld, including interference with outside worlds and genocide. The mysterious character called the Valyard acts as a prosecutor. In the first 2 chapters, The Mysterious Planet and Mind Warp, events from the Doctor's past and present are submitted as evidence of his guilt. The 3rd chapter, Terror of the Vervoids, presents future events in the Doctor's defense. And concluding chapter, The Ultimate Foe, the Doctor's trial is halted and the Doctor confronts the Valyard and his old rival, the Master, in order to clear his name and save the High Council. So the Valyard, it turns out the Valyard is a created being. He's created from the later incarnations of the Doctor. And the Valyard's full reason for being, he was off when they created him, they offered him a choice. It was like, you can go and prosecute the Doctor, and whatever lives he has left, you get to keep. So, and the Valyard's running around in the Matrix, and you get to run around in the Matrix again on Gallifrey, get some of that. And they basically plucked the Doctor out of space and time, so he's having a little bit of trouble throughout the series. This whole series is really good. they even kind of mess with him. They give him the idea that Perry was killed, that Perry was turned into an alien where her brain was replaced with an alien's brain. And she became this horrible overlord. So he was forced to basically kill her. Turns out that didn't actually happen, but you don't find out until the end of the series. So the first couple of episodes are really, really dark. But again, I would say if you're gonna jump into Colin Baker at all, you're gonna want to jump into Terror of the Vervoids. Just give that one a shot, and you'll really get to see how that guy has the depth and breadth of what he does. There's also a couple of things that they decided to do. Like he fixed the chameleon circuit. So it actually, the TARDIS is supposed to look like something else. It just got stuck as a police box.
Mm-hmm.
In a few Colin Baker episodes, he fixes it and it becomes something weird, like it sets down into an old junkyard, but it sets down as an old calliope. So it's not quite right. Because it's supposed to blend in with its background. It didn't turn into something in the junkyard. It turned into something, this big blue and pink calliope thing. So he goes and turns it back to blue again because he feels like he hasn't fiddled with it. But honestly, some of that stuff they toyed with, talked about it. He actually did it, and no one had done that before. Going in and fixing some of the things and trying to get the TARDIS where it works right. So I kind of like the way that they played with that. And again, Colin Baker says he would have done it for 8 years if they would have let him. I think if they would have given him if they'd have given him the same lead that they gave to Tom Baker, he would have been probably the best known Doctor. I really think so. It was because he's such a good actor. He's also very, very loved by the fan community, even though they didn't care for him when he was the Doctor. But again, not necessarily his fault. Some of the ideas were his, but not to the extent that they were portrayed on screen, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so, and again, he was pretty pissed off when it came down, and understandably so. But I agree, he probably should have swallowed his pride a little bit and done the regenerative episode, because it would have given him a little more closure, I think, just as much as the rest of us, instead of the way he did it. But he came back and did Dimensions in Time, and he also came back in Jodie Whittaker's last episode. He was one of the incarnations that talks to her, that were dressed in the robes. They had Peter Davidson, they had Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, and Paul McGann were all dressed in the robes, talking to the Doctor. It was actually quite touching, as well as it also had Ace, who was Sylvester McCoy's companion, as well as Tegan Javanka, which was Peter Davidson's companion. So yes, he does come back, and again, he was head of the Doctor Who Appreciation Society for 2 or 3 years. But yeah, that's basically about it for Colin Baker, other than get out and give him a chance.
It's probably the Doctor I am least familiar with.
Oh my God, he's so great as it. But again, you're going to watch that first episode. His first appearance, he basically just sits up and says, "And not a moment too soon." And it cuts away, and then you get the next episode where he's actually tries to strangle Perry. It's because he's going crazy.
Right.
His regeneration didn't work right. But he gets a hold of himself, and he goes to this asteroid where he's going to sit in seclusion, and he stumbles across an interplanetary threat, which he has to go in and fix, and ends up basically fixing his brain. But he's still a little weird from then on out. He yells at Perry a lot. which is weird because he doesn't yell at Mel at all. Even though Mel's only with him for like 2 episodes or 2 series. But yeah, that's the one. I would definitely give him a shot. I like him better than Peter Davison.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that is not Peter Davison's or Colin Baker's fault.
Mm-hmm.
It's due to the writing, because there are some Peter Davison episodes that are great, but Colin Baker really, when he inhabits this role, he really inhabited it. I would have liked to have seen what he could have done a little later on, but
Cool.
Meh. Michael Grade got his wish. He eventually killed the series 3 years later, to the detriment of everybody. I think.
Well, cool. Thanks for taking us down another trip for another doctor. Appreciate each and every one of those.
Well, thank you, sir.
With that, we'll step over to the murdery side of the house.
A murder.
Today, I got my information off All That's Interesting, Wikipedia, Delaware Today, and Oxygen, and this is the story of Steven Brian Pennell.
Steven Brian Pennell.
Steven Brian Pennell was both a sadistic killer and an enigma. Though married with I know. Though married with 2 children and a seemingly normal electrician by day, Pennell drove Delaware's Route 40 by night, torturing and killing 5 women throughout the late 1980s. The usually sedate state of Delaware was experiencing its first active serial killer and only known serial killer.
Huh.
In chasing the Route 40 killer, police would seek assistance from the FBI's Behavioral Sciences Unit and create a huge task force to capture him. And although Steven Brian Pennell was stunningly brazen when hunting his victims, his beloved blue work van turned mobile torture chamber would ultimately lead to his downfall. Steven Brian Pennell was born on November 22nd, 1957 in Wilmington, Delaware. And in childhood, Pennell seemed a good, shy, and timid kid, always helpful towards neighbors. He seemed fascinated by police work, often quizzing one of his police neighbors about his work when he arrived home in his cruiser. By high school, Pennell was up to 6 feet and was known as a gentle giant. Pennell graduated in 1976, spent 2 semesters studying criminology at a now-defunct college, and with a lifelong dream of becoming a police officer, he applied to the Wilmington Police Cadet Program but failed the physical testing. Pennell became a qualified electrician in 1987. Now married with 2 sons and a daughter from his wife's previous marriage, they lived in a Glasgow trailer near Route 40.
Why did they say why he failed? Was it for psychological or for
physical? Physical.
Okay.
Yeah, he failed the physical part of the cadet program.
I figured a big 6-foot guy. Huh.
Well, but 6'5", he weighed about 300 pounds.
Oh, okay.
So he was kind of a bigger guy.
Okay.
Generally considered a good family man, Pennell played sports with his children, gave neighboring kids rides to school, and even dressed as Santa Claus for the holidays. In addition to his electrical jobs, though, he did work part-time as a bouncer. Again, I said he stood 6'5" and weighed 300 pounds. He appeared intimidating, but a former customer of his once said it was a facade, said he just didn't command respect. Pennell's career as an electrician was a dud, and he couldn't hold down a job for very long. He ran up credit card bills, which put a strain on his marriage, causing incidents of domestic violence. Pennell broke his wife's arm once, which was never reported to police. On the rainy night of November 29, 1987, a couple driving through an industrial park in Newark, Delaware, thought they saw a mannequin at the side of the road. It's never a mannequin.
It's never a mannequin.
Instead, it was the beaten and mutilated body of 23-year-old Shirley A. Ellis. She had left Wilmington Hospital around 6 p.m., where she was aiding an AIDS patient catching a lift on her way home on Route 40. Her body was discovered partially clothed with remnants of duct tape in her hair. Ellis's autopsy revealed she had been bound at the hands and feet and tortured with work tools prior to her death, according to the Delaware Today. Ellis had been strangled and suffered repeated hammer blows to her head, but had not been sexually assaulted. Police had to use photos of her tattoos to identify the victim.
Oh, my God.
Ellis, previously a sex worker, had walked along Route 40 a few hours earlier as part of the 14-mile route to Wilmington Hospital and Ellis knew Route 40 well. The 23-year-old had distanced herself from the life of a streetwalker, even purchasing books for nursing school. Even so, she was well aware that the best way to catch a ride into the city was to hitchhike along Route 40, the area just south of Wilmington where she plied her trade. As she walked along the corridor, a car pulled up and offered her a ride, and she was carrying a Thanksgiving food package for a patient staying at the hospital. By June of 1988, Steven Brian Pennell was suffering from insomnia and arguing regularly with his wife, so he took long drives in his beloved blue Ford van. He favored routes along Route 40 and 30, returning home, and he often crashed out on the couch, awoke in the early hours, and then would go out again. On June 28, 1988, Catherine DeMauro was snatched from Route 40 around 11:30 p.m., according to Delaware Online. It was unclear if DeMauro, a sex worker, was working that night when approached by a blue van. Her naked body was found the next morning on a construction site bearing the same torture marks as Ellis. Once again, there was no evidence of sexual assault. Her body had been tortured and bludgeoned with work tools, and there was evidence of strangulation by ligature. There was one key difference between the victims, however. DeMauro was covered from head to toe in blue carpet fibers.
Huh.
A week later, officers from the Delaware State Police and Newcastle County Police Department sprang into action. A task force was formed, complete with its own headquarters near the Newcastle County Airport. With roughly 60 members, it was the state's largest police department for a time, third largest police department for a time. And fearing a pattern, the police consulted the FBI's behavioral science unit with John E. Douglas creating a profile for the killer, and he confirmed the police's worst fears that Delaware had its first serial killer. On August 22nd, sex worker Margaret Lynn Finner vanished from Route 13. Her stepfather reported her missing that day, had received a phone call from a friend of hers the following day. Finner had been last seen getting into a blue Ford van. The driver was a white male, but the witnesses couldn't recognize any other distinguishing features. With a depraved sexual sadist driving up and down Delaware highways and the killer deriving his pleasure from the extreme pain he was subjecting to victims, the FBI's BSU recommended proactive tactics. To catch him, the police would need to lure the killer out. In July, police set up a decoy operation with female undercover officers posing as sex workers along Route 40 and 13, hoping to catch a killer. Wired for eventual evidential audio, the officers had instructions not to enter any vehicle stopping for them. On September 10th, Kathleen Meyer, who was last seen alive hitchhiking along Route 40 around 9:30 p.m., an off-duty police officer unaware of the ongoing decoy operation saw her enter in a blue Ford van. She was suspicious enough to note the license plate, but he, suspicious enough to note the license plate, he didn't share information at the time, and Meyer's body was never found. 4 nights later, as reported by Delaware Online, undercover cop Renee Lano noticed a blue van passing her 7 times near Route 40, the van making U-turns at each pass. The undercover team proactively drove her to a darker, more secluded area of Route 40 where the blue van drove past and finally stopped in front of her. The driver wanted her to get in, but instead she feigned interest in the van, asking him to turn on the interior light. And Lano saw blue carpeting covering the van's interior panels. The driver appeared sullen, untalkative, and very different from the driver she had previously encountered. And thinking on her feet, Lano ran her hands along the passenger side door jamb, subtly grabbing a handful of blue fibers. After further discussions and excuses from Lano, the van driver left. Officers ran the van's license plate, RV2059, and found it was registered to Steven Brian Pennell, a Delaware electrician. Pennell lived off Route 40, close to where the previous bodies had been found. The forensics lab tested Pennell's van fibers found against those found on the body of DeMauro, and Pennell was placed under surveillance, and on the night of September 18th was observed driving circuits of Route 13 and 40. Pennell finally went back home, and when investigators observed the lights going out, they departed thinking their suspect had gone to bed. However, Pennell later left that night for another long cruise along Route 40. Later that night, witnesses reported sex worker Michelle Gordon getting into a blue van. Her family had reported her missing days earlier. 2 days later, on September 20th, Gordon's nude, mutilated, and beaten body was discovered washed up on the rocks of the Chesapeake and Delaware Canal. A cocaine addict, she was the only victim who died while being tortured. The medical examiner testified that the drugs in her system made her heart incapable of withstanding the shock of her beating. On September 23rd, a 26-year-old Kathleen Ann Meyer of Brookmont Farms disappeared. A police officer saw her get into a blue van on Route 40 at 9:30 p.m. He was able to write down the license plate number, which turned out to belong to Pennell's car, but her body was never found. On September 24th, the blue fibers between Steven Brian Pennell's van and the second victim were a confirmed match. Police created a huge task force with an unlimited budget, and Pennell was placed under 24-hour surveillance. He was tailed by unmarked vehicles and air support as he made his late-night drives, continuously circling routes 40 and 13. Pennell was pulled over for a routine traffic stop on September 30th, and as he was taken to court to pay for his fine, a listening device was installed in his van. Investigators took carpet fibers, fabric swatches, and photos of the interior and exterior of his van, and they saw that his van contained further disturbing evidence: pliers, a whip, handcuffs, needles, knives, and restraints. And I wonder at this time why they didn't completely arrest him.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know.
Maybe they didn't think they had enough evidence.
I guess not at this point. I would think they did, but the investigation continued. But Pennell...
Well, this is the late 80s. They don't have the type of forensic stuff that we've got now. And from what I understand, a lot of the forensic stuff we've got now has just been developed in the last 25 years.
Oh, just wait. Just wait. The investigation continued, but Pennell, suspecting surveillance, now found the covert bug as he cleaned out his van.
Oh, no.
Following this, officers raided his home and further searched his van. On November 12th, the hunter discovered skeletal remains near the canal, and the autopsy revealed it was Margaret Finner, who had been missing since August 22nd. Her body was so badly decomposed that the exact cause of death could not be determined, although signs of torture were visible on her remains. Finner was identified using dental records. Pennell was now arrested at his home for murder on November 29, 1988, exactly 1 year after he claimed his first victim, and he reportedly said to arresting officers, "I guess it's time."
Wow.
On trial for 3 serial murders, according to court records, Pennell was convicted through his victim's DNA blood and hair found inside of his van, so DNA was used.
Oh, wow.
Blue carpet fiber matches and witness testimony. A torture kit was also found, which included pliers, whips, handcuffs, needles, knives, and restraints. And Pennell was found guilty on 2 murders, with the jury unable to find guilt for the third, and he received 2 life sentences. At the start of the trial, a panel of defense attorneys claimed that the initial fiber taken by Officer Tashner was obtained illegally because it was taken from his car, but Judge Richard Gabeline dismissed these allegations, saying the carpet was visible to Tashner's eyes as soon as she opened the vehicle, so evidence from these fibers was legal. Once the fibers was examined, it was shown that they had DNA residue belonging to the victims, and this was the first trial in the United States that used DNA evidence as absolute legal evidence.
Oh, wow.
Gabeline had to set a legal precedence and listen to the opinions of experts and scientists who helped verify the DNA evidence. Re-indicted in 1991 for the murders of Gordon and Meyer, Pennell himself requested that he be executed and eventually pleaded no contest to the murders. He claimed he didn't want to upset his family with another trial. He never disclosed the location of Meyer's body, and on March 14, 1992, the state executed Pennell via lethal injection. Pennell purchased his van on June 3, 1988, installing the blue carpet following his first victim. Steven Brian Pennell's decision to install the blue carpet led to the fiber evidence that ultimately ended his terrifying spree of serial killing. And thanks to that one tiny bit of evidence, the reign of one of modern history's most disturbing predators finally came to an end. Prior to the execution, numerous reporters tried to ask Pennell for exclusive interviews, hoping to reveal the location of Meyer's body, but he turned down every request. When it came close to his execution date, he agreed to be interviewed by one newspaper with his lawyer present. During this interview, Pennell revealed no information nor where he had hidden Meyer's body. And then finally, on March 14, 1992, at 9:49 a.m., Pennell was executed by lethal injection, becoming the first person executed in Delaware in 46 years and the 165th person to be executed in the United States since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976.
Wow.
And that is the story of Steven Brian Pennell.
Wow. That was an interesting ride.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So Delaware had a serial killer.
Delaware had a serial killer. Its first. Normally quiet Delaware had its first serial killer.
Huh.
And John Douglas from the Behavioral Sciences Unit was stepped in, as he often does.
Nice.
He often makes appearances in these stories.
Love that dude.
Yep. So thanks for taking that ride with me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, sir.
That'll take us to the end of another recording week. As always, you can find our information on nerderymurdery.com. You can find more information of what we talked about, links to our episode, as well as pictures and links to our YouTube.
That's right. We do have a YouTube page where every single episode has a playlist, as well as videos and things that you might find enjoyable and peeks behind the curtain, that sort of thing.
Yes, appreciate your work on all of that.
Thank you, sir.
You can also find the link to our merchandise, where if you wish to become a Nerdery and Murdery, show off your Nerdery and Murdery fandom, please do consider purchasing some of that. And you can find the link to our Patreon, where if you wish to become a donator to our show, help us keep our show going. There are costs that are associated with it, and we appreciate each and every one of our patrons.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. Last but not least, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It really helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking for the subject matters we discuss. So with that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
and I'm Geoffrey with your murdery.
Cue the music.